Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, this morning on another channel, Jeremy Corbyn has told Donald Trump to grow up. It's very different from the language used by those close to him in the hours after Trump's victory. Shadow Foreign Secretary Emily Thornberry made quite a claim. She compared her boss to Trump. Yes, she actually did. Here is why. So, they are both outsiders, she says. Corbyn, never in any cabinet. Trump, never holding elected office. They shun the mainstream media. They prefer Twitter and Facebook and other social media to get their message out directly. And that message, the so-called left behind, they want, well, shared out better. Make America great again from the Donald. But from Corbyn, he's talking about the election. He's saying it's a rejection of political establishment and an economic system that's left too many behind. Never mind that Corbyn has the support of a few 100,000, Trump 59 million. I wonder what Ed Miliband makes of a left-wing leader being likened to a Republican. Robert.
Well, I'm delighted to be joined by Ed Miliband. The Brexit vote, the Trump election, it's an utter disaster, isn't it, for the kind of sort of liberal centre-left politics that you've devoted your life to?
Well, it's very worrying for the world. Donald Trump's victory, and it is a political earthquake. But I actually...
Doesn't it represent a rejection of more or less everything that we represent?
No, I think what it is an instruction to us to do is to come up with much bigger solutions to the deep economic and, frankly, political rejection that we see in the vote for Donald Trump. Look, the thing about Donald Trump's victory, he did better among union households than any Republican for 30 years. He did better among working-class Americans, low-income Americans, certainly than Mitt Romney did in 2012. Now, I don't think you can reduce this victory, his victory, to one thing, because I think race is obviously an issue in America. But this was a deep rejection of an economic system that is seen to be failing lots of people. And yeah, I do think the economic system is failing people, and we've got to come up with bigger solutions.
But his economic prescription, cutting taxes for the very rich, cutting taxes for companies.
Yeah, well, I don't agree with his solution.
Protectionism. People that, you know, the people that you want to woo voted for all of that.
Yeah.
So where the hell does that leave Labour?
Why did it happen? OK, so here's my view about why it happened. Because many Americans, the majority of Americans, thought the country was on the wrong track, and he was promising change. And I don't actually think the detail of change was what they voted for. I think it was the sense that things needed to be shaken up, a bit like the Brexit vote.
How important do you think was wariness of immigration? You know, what you regarded as sort of coded racism?
Well, I think we've got to be really careful about here is to pretend or suggest that 60 million Americans are racists. They're not.
I'm not suggesting anything.
No, I know you're not. And look, remember, lots of the people who voted for Trump actually voted for Obama in 2008 and 2012. So I'm absolutely not denying that immigration and race were issues in the election of Donald Trump. But class and the economy and the fact that Americans hadn't had a pay rise for 30 or 40 years and that they feared for their kids and what their chances would be, that was an issue too. Now, they were things we talked about too in Britain during the run-up to 2015. To be self-critical, we had big analysis, but not sufficiently big solutions. I think that was part of our problem. It wasn't the only problem, but it was part of the challenge that we faced.
Jeremy Corbyn on Arjamar just now singularly failed to say that he would clamp down on numbers of people coming into this country from abroad. Should the Labour leader make more of a pledge to reduce immigration numbers?
Well, I'm not going to tell him what to do, because I didn't like that when I was a leader. But look, if you're asking me, should we carry on with free movement as was? I don't think we should. I do think we've got to look in the Brexit negotiations. I think we've got to look for change in terms of free movement. But I think we've got to...
What would you think is consistent with your values, then?
Well, I'm not going to pluck a sort of proposal out of the air, but I think that one of the things from the referendum is that free movement can't carry on exactly as it did before. But what I was going to say was you've got to hold both of these things together, though, and this is Labour's case, which is what is our economic future going to be like? Because we can't burn the economy and burn our economic future and how do we get change on free movement? And that is, if you like, at the heart of the negotiations, which is to get change on free movement, but let's not forget the economy. Let's make sure we put the economy first, something Keir Starmer said on your programme a couple of weeks back, because the Leave voters who wanted economic change and economic improvement, the worst thing we can do to them is kind of do terrible damage to our economy, our trading relationships, selling our services into the European market. That would not be a service to them.
And what about this issue of authenticity? Whether it's reasonable or not, people plainly think that Trump is somehow more authentic. They thought the same of Bernie Sanders. Many people see Jeremy Corbyn as a very authentic politician. What lesson does that have for people like you? That
you mustn't own the failure of the political system, you've got to own the change in the political system. In other words, if you're an insider who looks like you're defending the political system and business as usual, that is in a way the litmus test and the dividing line of today's politics. Do you defend a system that people think is rigged against them, or are you a change maker of that system? Now,
So how do the Milibands, a brand, a dynasty, how do you detach yourself...
Dynasty is quite right, but anyway, yeah, go on.
Well, but you are perceived a bit like the Clintons as being part of a certain establishment.
Well, look, I'm a backbench MP supporting Jeremy Corbyn, who's the leader of our party, so, it's not for me to try and... I'm not trying to win the next general election. Jeremy Corbyn's trying to win the next general election. I actually think his political outsider status is something that is going to be helpful to him. His challenge, it was my challenge too, is to get a message across to the country, as he's successfully done in the Labour Party, about what kind of change he wants to bring. How does he want to change the system? Now, the challenge we also face in Britain is there are some people who want reassurance, to know Labour can be trusted on the big issues around the economy, but there are some people also who want big change as well, and that's the thing you've got to get right.
Now, in this country, Brexit remains and will be for years the big issue of the moment. You initially seemed to be going alongside Nick Clegg in calling for Theresa May to reveal more about her plans and also demanding a bigger role for Parliament in scrutinising those plans. Nick Clegg and the Liberal Democrat leader, Tim Farron, however, have begun to talk about a second vote, a second referendum to ratify whatever deal she comes up with. Would you ally yourself with that plea for a second vote?
No. And let me explain why. Look, I understand the people the 48%, who feel deeply disappointed and angry and frustrated by this vote. I didn't seek this referendum, but we had the referendum, and we've got to respect the result. Right. And we are leaving the European Union.
So now, for you, there's no chink, there's no way of remaining in the European Union?
No, let me make this point to you. Yeah. If we see, and some people will be disappointed by my answer, but if we seed the field and we just say we're the people who want to reverse the result, then there's two choices in Britain: hard, destructive Brexit, or reversing the result. I know what's going to win. Hard Brexit's going to win. But that's what's going to happen.
But isn't hard Brexit going to win in any case? I mean, Nigel Farage, I spoke to earlier this week, he and, frankly, all the Brexiteers in the Cabinet regard anything other than hard Brexit as a betrayal of the vote. They absolutely reject, for example, membership of the single market.
Nigel Farage might be our liaison with Donald Trump, but he doesn't yet get to decide UK government policy, as far as I know, unless you know something that we don't. The reality is that there are lots of different modes for Britain outside the European Union. There's Norway, there's Switzerland, there's Turkey in the customs union outside the single market. Now, my point is there's got to be a vote in Parliament before Theresa May begins these negotiations, so we know what plan she's taking into those negotiations. And that's not important for Parliament, that's important for the country. Because at the moment, the government seems to want to say, we're going to conduct this all in secret. We're not going to let the country into our plans. And that is where I think the pressure's got to be applied in Parliament. And by the way, I don't just have Labour people on my side. I've got Liberal Democrats on my side, Tories on my side, who are rightly saying we're worried about a rush to a destructive hard Brexit. We want to know what the plan is.
Now, as you know, there frankly is only one election that matters. It's the Strictly election. Who are you backing?
Well, I'm backing Mr. Balls.
So all that tension has gone.
No, he's doing absolutely brilliantly. I always knew he had it in him. I'm actually thinking that it's easy to rewrite to sort of have a good hindsight, but I'm thinking that maybe sort of 2 years ago, when he was Shadow Chancellor, we should have launched upon this. You know, it would have won us votes. I definitely...
Actually, as a dance couple before...
Well, I'm not sure about the couple. No, I'm not.
Come on, we've got to get you...
He does it brilliantly with another partner, not with me.
Very nice to see you, Miliband. So, what's the verdict on what we've just heard? Oh, OK. So what's the verdict on what we just heard, both from Howard Davies and from Ed Miliband? I mean, before we get on to Ed and his, I think, completely overwhelming endorsement for you on Strictly, which was terrific. Howard Davies, I thought, made a very worrying point about the extent to which banks are beginning to make serious plans to leave Britain because of the absence of detail on what Brexit means. I mean, this is a genuine worry, isn't it?
Theresa May's the Prime Minister, and if you're the Prime Minister, you have to lead. You can't stand back and say, leave it to Liam Fox or Nigel Farage. She's got to chart a course for the country, which includes the approach she's going to take to the negotiations and where she wants to end up. And Ed's completely right, there's a choice. We're not going to reverse the referendum, but are we going to stay engaged with our main trading partner outside the EU, but within the single market, and argue for the kind of changes to free movement which we need, and Ed's right about that, or are we going to lurch to what becomes a sort of false utopian isolationism in the belief that somehow Donald Trump is going to do a deal with us which he won't, which would be catastrophic for jobs, for financial services, for manufacturing. And Theresa May's got to take a view. She can't just stand back. Does she want Britain to stay engaged in Europe and the global trading system, or does she want to kind of get back to some past fantasy world? And I don't know. And she's got to lead. We need to know where she's going.
Esther, the Prime Minister has said she does not want to have negotiating hands tied by disclosing detail. So can she say enough in time to keep our banking industry in this country?
I think she can. I don't really think your analysis was quite right. What I heard from Howard Davies, I think he was saying there's very much a transitional sort of period. Changes had been happening afoot beforehand, and we've got to really extol the virtues of the UK above and beyond of what it was as a sort of central point for other people going into Europe. And there are many things, the rule of law being one of them, stability being here, the timing, the time zone being here. There are many reasons that we are the centre of banking, and we need to keep that way. In fact, people were moving to America before they were moving over to Europe. So I didn't hear it like that. Now, what she's doing, what Theresa's
by default, they will start to go unless they get a lead.
Yeah, there's an American looking in.
So let's not be, as Boris said, let's not all be the gloom and doom merchants and the windjarama. There is positivity here, and the first thing starts with going to and working with America.
But as an American looking in, how concerned do you think we Brits should be about the impact of Brexit on the city?
Well, I think that they already did move a lot of people that were not British bankers when the 30,000 tax came in, or we had to pay on our worldwide income as we do in the U.S. And I think that as long as the laws can be worked out, I would see that some businesses would definitely stay. And if they had more interest on the other side, then they would have to move.
Some, but not all. But back to Allegra.
OK, on a serious note, Sun journalist Steve Hawkes saying, Ed Miliband telling Peston, should we carry on with free movement as was? I don't think we should. He's saying, bit late now, Ed. But on a lighter note, loads of people out there pointing out, we think, that this is the first time Ed Miliband and Ed Balls have been in the same room since the general election. Maybe you can ask Balls that later, Robert. Is that not true, Ed Miliband? He's sitting there shaking his head. OK, well, look, Trump was Mr Brexit after all, with 59 million to Brexit 17. He wasn't quite Brexit times 10, more like Brexit times 3.5. So, was history repeating? Well, let's have a look. So, first of all, those polls. Now, look, national polls were not actually that wrong, but state polls were way off, and this is the crisscross that happened on the night. It is a little bit not like our own referendum night. This then, next bit, helps explain why it's turnout. Now, what you're looking at here is the huge vote that Donald Trump got with white voters with no college degree. But the key thing is that in this group, much larger numbers of them turned out than expected. Usually, they say they vote, but they don't, and so pollsters downplay them in their models. This possibly happened in our referendum too. Perhaps that's why some of those state polls were so off. And then next, this map, it's the Rust Belt, the kind of rudely named Rust Belt. You can see here, the darker red is the massive swings from Hillary to Trump, and it is all clustered up here in that Rust Belt. In particular, Michigan, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania went Republican for the first time since the 80s, just as vast swathes of Labour England defied their party to Brexit. Now, there are differences. There's quite a lot. Clinton won low-income voters. They backed Brexit here. Post-Brexit, we're into free trade. Trump is all about protection. But for many, it was déjà vu all over again. Robert.
Thanks, Allegra. Now, Ed, we heard Jeremy Corbyn say that he actually thought Bernie Sanders would have done better than Hillary Clinton. Do you think he's right?
I don't think so. And I think the policy prescriptions that Bernie and Hillary were setting out were actually very similar. And the problem was they were not winning that argument. And it goes to the parallel between Donald Trump and Jeremy Corbyn. Ed is right. There is a great deal of unease about globalisation and the economic system. What Donald Trump...
But it is weird, though, isn't it, that you know, Donald Trump can win the votes of people on low-ish incomes, not the lowest, but low-ish incomes, by saying he's going to cut the tax rate for those at the top. It's extraordinary, isn't it?
But what Donald Trump managed to do is he managed to win the argument with centre-right voters that he was going to tackle things they were worried about, which were trade and immigration and concerns about the way in which the tax system was operating. I don't like his prescriptions, but he was reaching right into that position. Now, if you take the parallel with Labour here, I'm afraid the centre-left in Britain is not arguing for us to get rid of nuclear weapons or leave NATO or nationalise industry or just spend and spend and spend. And I'm afraid Jeremy Corbyn has got to be the answer to people's concerns. And at the moment, the policy prescription doesn't deliver. We may not like the fact that Donald Trump was winning centre-right voters, but he did. And if Labour's going to succeed, you can't just be outsiders and protest. You've got to persuade centre-left voters to trust Labour and that Labour's got the answers. And at the moment, that's not happening.
So can I just be clear about this? You do think that ideas still matter? Because you could look at what Trump said to the American people, which was filled with contradictions and was all over the shop in terms of left and right. And you could actually say it's no longer about ideas, it's just about big personalities who are simply saying the old establishment are crap and, you know, we need something different.
Look, he analysed the situation, and look, it's no surprise that now is the time that this is happening, the changes are happening within the political system. Then there's a couple of key things that's gone into that. It's a disconnect of MPs or leaders with the people who are voting for them. So, you know, Ed Miliband, as an example, he voted to remain in. 70% of his constituency voted out. They're not connecting. So people you would have ordinarily voted for, you're saying, I don't see you as my leader anymore. You're not connecting. So you've got, the people have got to look at themselves, the leaders. Also, massive time of change. I call it the fourth industrial revolution. We're in a massive change. As you said, polarisation of the workforce, globalisation, automation, connectivity. And that's the third point, connectivity. He could go beyond the regular forms of connecting with people and connect in a different way. And those three things
are lurch to the right?
It's not a lurch to the right.
You know, actually, as an American, I don't agree with what you're saying. I mean, first off, one of the problems that has existed is that there has been identity politics, which has been special interests and social issues on both sides. We don't have any moderates. We might have moderates with Trump coming in. I think Bernie Sanders would have taken it. But there were so many...
Would have won.
He would, yes, I do. I think he would have had a very good chance because we had 40 million more Democrats on the voter polls, and we had turnout of the Democrats lower than 2004. And she betrayed Bernie's supporters. And so I would suspect a lot of them stayed home in the 5 million for Johnson and Stein.
Very interesting.
But